Hey everybody, it's me. We're doing our fourth node, and today we're going to talk about Horse Soldier Bourbon. And I want to thank you guys for joining me today. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on whatever time you're watching this. Um, so yeah, we just recently had Memorial Day weekend, and just wanted to thank all our present, past, and future veterans, soldiers, and those who gave the ultimate sacrifice to help this land and this country be what it is. So we can do things like this, make videos, make great tasting bourbon. And that's why I kind of chose today to talk about Horse Soldier Bourbon, because it's one, an amazing bourbon. It was started by some amazing group of veterans. Like if you guys ever heard of the movie 12 Strong, about the first 12 Green Berets that went into Afghanistan after 9/11. Well, the actual group is the one who started Horse Soldier Bourbon, or American Freedom Distillery, which makes Horse Soldier Bourbon. Um, this bottle right here is the ABC Barrel Pick. It's a 13-year-old bourbon, and it is about $100, but is definitely one of my favorites. Usually tell people that I work that this is definitely one of my favorites. It's very good, very flavorful. You definitely get a nice little butterscotch, vanilla, caramel. But kind of going back to the story, as we talked about, they were the first Green Berets that went into Afghanistan, joined up with the Northern Alliance to fight the Taliban, and they were actually rode in on horseback, hence the name Horse Soldier. And this is a statue that you will find in New York City, right next to the World Trade Center. World Trade Center Memorial, that commemorates their efforts and helping to fight back the Taliban, help to fight Al Qaeda. Um, and after their many years of service, they decided, after kind of sitting down in Somerset, Kentucky, uh, and going and exploring some other great places over in Europe, they decided to start Horse Soldier Bourbon, and here we are today. And the great story also too behind the bottle is that each bottle, when they cast the bottle, it's the metal cast is made from metal they recover from the World Trade Center. So every single bottle is touched by a piece of that metal, which kind of makes it a pretty interesting little commemoration of their efforts to the people who lost their lives. Um, and it's just a great product, and I definitely highly recommend it. They're actually locally based here in St. Petersburg. The bourbon itself is distilled in a partnership in a distillery up in Columbia, Ohio. And they will be eventually building their own distillery, like I mentioned, in Somerset, Kentucky. And it's, from what I've heard, it will be a pretty amazing little destination. But the destination here in St. Petersburg is very cool. They have a restaurant called the Urban Still House. Highly recommend. I can't wait to go. I'm hoping to be able to go soon. Maybe even have an interview with some of these guys. I met a couple of them, and they're really great guys, very humble, and they make some amazing bourbon. So I want to have you guys join me for a drink, and let me know again down in the comments what you guys are having. Always love to hear what people love to drink. So again, join me for a little drink today as we continue on to discuss this amazing spirit. So cheers. Yep. Oh yeah, definitely a really great bourbon. You really get that nice like honey and butterscotch right off the top. And so yeah, today we're going to talk a little bit more, like I mentioned in my last video, where we talked a little bit more about the Whiskey Rebellion and a little bit with the history of the whiskeys. as it pertains to when it finally came over to America, it pretty much started its life as a raw aged spirit, where people were distilling it from rye, wheat, barley, and it was unaged. Definitely didn't look like this. Uh, but now, going a little bit in the future, 300 years has come, and now it's basically cherished by connoisseurs, your grandparents, and people today just love that good taste of bourbon. And kind of the earliest record of Americans, especially when it came to starting the corn. And here's the answer to that trivia question I asked in the last video, where what were the four predominant grains in making bourbon? Well, it's predominant. The first one is corn. The second or others would be rye, wheat, or barley. Those are the four predominant grains that you get out of bourbon or whiskeys. And the earliest known record of Americans that is supposedly was from Captain James Thorpe, a missionary who was in Virginia, in the colony of Virginia, and wrote some of his friends and family back in England that he was starting to find Indians that were making this corn-based spirit. So that was, or basically, and he loved it so much that he even chose it over the English beer, which kind of tells you something right there. But now after the American Revolution, the Whiskey Rebellion, which played, like I mentioned in the last video, which played a huge role in the strengthening of the American federal government, this newly formed government that no one knew if it was going to work. This great experiment that we keep loving to mention that is still going on now, 200 something years now. And whiskey and bourbon played a huge part of that. Now, when it comes to where it actually started, that's a little bit of a mystery in its own right. If you read some books like The Whiskey Course or Bourbon, The Rise, the Fall, and the Rebirth of an American Spirit, you'll definitely find out some different little stories on the beginning of bourbon. The most well-known is the one where Elijah Craig, who settled in what was eventually going to become Kentucky, near Bourbon County. He was a Baptist minister who, when he eventually settled in the future Kentucky, he started to distill whiskey. So that's kind of like one of the most well-known stories. It hasn't had a whole lot of proof to say that was the first one. There's a lot of another one would people want to say is sorry, give me one second. Was another gentleman who was Vici was his name, and he was the one who's been kind of credited with giving that story prominence. Kind of maybe was more used to fight against the prohibition movement that happened about 100 or so years later. But yeah, so basically, as far as we know, the history of bourbon kind of started when, after the Whiskey Rebellion, as we talked about in the last video, those people who fled Pennsylvania, they eventually went on to Kentucky, which was at that time a part of Virginia, and then later was turned into its own territory and eventually its own state in about the 1780s. Those people came to Kentucky. They met some of the Native Americans. The Native Americans introduced them to their corn or their maize. And the reason they decided to go with corn instead of, let's say, rye or barley is because, well, the corn grew a lot better in this place called Kentucky. And it was actually, there's a saying that says, heaven must be a Kentucky kind of place. And a lot of that has to go back to the fact that Kentucky soil was very fertile, it was very rich. And this was before the practices of crop rotation, where, you know, after a farmer had been on the land for about 7 years, the land would just kind of get tired and not produce as much as it used to. But Kentucky had a very good source of fertile soil. It had the limestone water that we hear so much about in the creation of bourbon. And okay. So yeah, it's definitely something that's kind of unique to Kentucky. It's why Kentucky is so well known for the creation of bourbon. And a lot of other facts was that there's this story where when farmers started to ship their bourbon down the Mississippi River, they put it in oak barrels that they had charred, because a lot of these oak barrels were used to store pickles, they were used to store fish. So what they did is they charred the inside to get rid of that smoke, or to get rid of that bad taste. And so when they put their whiskey in there to ship down to New Orleans, which was a huge port, and of course it was very well known for Bourbon Street, even back then, it was that point where they kind of say maybe the one of the many stories that was how bourbon got its name. And you find so many different stories that kind of go around that how bourbon got its start, and it's very interesting. It really ties very into the fabric of the creation of this country. And so I definitely highly recommend getting one of these books that I brought or mentioned to you, because it's just a great read. Again, we'll go further into some more details, like how the cask got involved with the creation of bourbon, just different facts. But I also kind of wanted to see what your guys' opinion was, and hear what you guys had to drink today. What's your favorite drinks? What kind of notes you get? Have you ever had Horse Soldier Bourbon? If you have, let me know. Definitely love to hear the feedback. So please comment down below and let me know if you like this video. Give it a like. Give me any feedback. I love to hear feedback from you guys. And then also, too, I kind of want to mention that next week I had the opportunity to go to St. Augustine Distillery, which is an amazing distillery. It's by far one of the #1 whiskey tours in the country by TripAdvisor. So I'm looking really forward to hopefully share that experience with you guys, to talk to you guys about St. Augustine Distillery, to kind of show you, hey, Florida does have a good distilling culture. And some good bourbons. So that's my hope. And then also I hope to be meeting up with these guys and doing an interview with one of them. So we'll see. And as well, I also, one of my friends mentioned about showing you guys some of like how they make some of these great cocktails as well. Like the smoked old fashions, and showing you some of that technology that comes out today. And then also probably doing a interview with Giggle Water, which is one of these awesome little speakeasies down here in the Tampa Bay area, actually over in Safety Harbor. So I hope to be doing an interview with them, to kind of talk to them about, their business, why they decided to kind of do that speakeasy theme. Also talk to them about some good bourbons that they have, some of the great food. So again, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know, give me some feedback, and I hope you guys want to continue joining me on this journey as we do this bourbon blog. And I hope you guys have a great day. And if you're gonna drink with me. And salud.
Really good.